Hey everyone, it's Andrea. Today is October 17th. This is my diary for today. I've been thinking about the night sky. I've been looking at the night sky, thinking of the night sky, and when I was a kid, I used to go lay in the middle of our yard or garden or whatever you want to call it, like grassy area around our house, and look at the stars at night because one of my teachers, Dr. Lynch, wherever you are, in 5th grade told me to go lay in the grass and look at the stars and imagine myself on a round object, which was the earth, and then imagine all of them as round, and then try to imagine this constellation of this little me on this giant earth, which was then just a little dot in this night sky with all these other stars. So maybe tonight go look at the sky if you can find somewhere to see the stars, or one day turn your eyes to the stars and you won't just see random points of light. Probably you might start to see patterns. That's constellations like the Big Dipper or Cassiopeia or Orion, or you can make up your own. We all naturally start to connect the stars, like drawing lines between them, creating means of understanding what we're looking at, creating meaning, I guess, from this relationship of all these beautiful points of light, which are remarkably not connected actually in any sort of way like that, even though they do make patterns for us, but they're actually separated by vast distances, at least for us, light years, empty space. Some of them maybe aren't even burning anymore. We just still see them. So they're separated by vast distances, light years of empty space, but we see them as wholes, as figures, as stories across the cosmos. I mean, think of how many people over all of human life, or life in general for people, have looked up at the sky and made stories out of these beautiful lights. And that's sort of where we begin, in a way. Um, it's what I've been trying to think of through this constellation thinking. That sense I had with my back against the earth and feeling how small I was, and also how immense and amazing the universe was as I looked up at the stars, realizing I was part of it, holding that tension of being so small and yet part of something so amazing has really stayed with me since I was a kid, and now I'm, getting old. And but I still think of this image a lot, and it helps me to get out of linear ways of thinking. It's a pretty metaphor, but it's actually more than that too. It's a shift in how we can understand reality, thought, our place in the world. And Western philosophy's been very wonderful, and I love Western philosophy, but we often end up thinking in terms of isolated objects or separate things that are sort of like billiard balls bumping into each other, or, here is the mind and there is the world out there, or here are facts, here are values, and everything is sort of separated and supposed to be in its place. Out of that, we've started to develop all kinds of ways of defining ourselves and thinking we're part of these different groups and separated, and there's a lot of truth in that, of course. There's a lot of ways we overlap and share worlds with people. But I'm trying to invite us to think a little bit differently with this idea of constellation thinking, to maybe recognize we're individuals at the same time that we have our back on the earth, which is a round, semi round object in this constellation of other stars and planets. And that's really mysterious, and we don't understand that. And there's all this space between it. And yet at the same time, how amazing that we're all part of that. We're all on the same earth. And I think that's an act of perception that connects us towards meaning if we let it. It's a little bit scary, but it's not mystic. It's not mystical, or it can be mystical, but it doesn't have to be. It's actually just, if you really notice the amazing ability of lived experience, that we can actually understand that we're in this world, and that this world appears in a certain way, and that we don't understand it. I think you begin to open up to understanding what it might be like to think in a constellatory way, which just means catching yourself when you're judging yourself or when you're judging others, and maybe noticing that you're judging it in this kind of either or way. It's either right or it's wrong. It's good or it's bad. It's, that person is whatever, looking good today or they didn't take care of themselves. And the reality of our life is that we are all, for example, just trying our best every day to look as good as we can, I guess, or eat as healthy as we can, give as much as we can, work as hard as we can. Everyone's in a different place, and it's not always an easy place for any of us, wherever we are. And when we try to judge each other, especially when we try to judge ourselves through either or linear ways of thinking, then it's like we're turned around faced towards the earth. We're not able to feel the earth on our back, and we're not looking at this constellation that is us in a way. We're a lot of different people, and we're a lot of different people in a lot of different situations. And everyone we encounter is as well. And they're all trying their best, or at least we can imagine it that way from the beginning. And try to imagine all the things that have gone into their constellation of who they are, all the different ways they've come to be who they are. There's a tradition in philosophy that I talk about a lot called phenomenology, and that's this lived experience, which I keep bringing up. Phenomenologists ask us to sort of return to our lived experience, to just your experience right now. You are not your thoughts, first of all. You're your presence. If you're just that for a moment, the constellation starts to open because you're not trapped in your thoughts. You're not trapped in judgment, which is always either or. There's a philosopher named Maurice Merleau-Ponty who wrote about this with perception, and he didn't describe a mind as like receiving data from the world. He described it as always immersed in a meaningful world. So it's engaged, it's embodied, it's present, and that's how it's developing its ideas of itself. But you can also sort of relax into that and realize that you are that sensuality, and that, you know, a door is door like, not because you measured it and put it in your mental database. It's a door because you know what it means to grasp the handle and open it and walk through it. Portals are like that too in other areas of life. We don't need to always understand what it is. I can feel the power of the stars when I lay on the ground at night without actually really fully understanding at all what is happening or what is going on there. I was in Iceland recently and we saw the northern lights, and I still don't really understand what was going on there, even though I watched videos about how it happens and solar light and all of this. But the feeling it gives me, just when I'm sensing it and not judging it, opens something for me. And it doesn't need to be explained, and it doesn't need to be termed as anything unexplainable either. And I guess what I'm trying to do by introducing this is to think about care, this word care, love. I talk about love a lot, but care is also a word that philosophically and in a lot of different literature carries a lot of weight and meaning. And it's also a word that holds paradox, or that tries to kind of get towards this idea of beyond dichotomy, letting the dichotomies be what they are, looking at the space around it, starting to notice, oh, there's another planet over there and another over there. And what you thought was just two is actually a constellation. And care is a little bit like that. There's this philosopher, Martin Heidegger, in the phenomenological tradition, and his idea of care, even in German, it means a word that can mean something like anxiety, or something like, yeah, it's concern, I guess is the better word. Concern and care are sort of the same. It means care, but it also means worry, or even burden can mean burden a little bit, which I think we all understand. If you care for something, it can be work. It's not always wonderful and easy, but there's also this sense of it being meaningful when you are able to care for something. And it can help us to care for something if we relax into our bodies and understand this different way of thinking, what I'm calling this constellation. If we realize we're one little speck on the earth looking at the stars, and also at the same time that we're part of that amazing mystery, whatever that is. Once we just let ourselves be that, and relax into that, maybe we can start to understand how to care in a different way, in a way that doesn't try to say it's not hard and anxious and concerning, but also in a way that still is committed to tending to the garden, or, watering the plants, whatever uh, needs to be done to try to help it thrive. Now, you don't have everything in your control, it's fragile. You have to acknowledge that fragility and that temporality, but care holds the attachment and the possibility of letting go. It holds the absence and the presence. And it's a state of noticing, that it's that state that I remember as a kid, of noticing that I feel the earth behind me in this dark night, and I see these stars, and I'm part of this. It's just noticing that. That's a kind of step into care, because then you also notice, like, maybe you've been talking in a way that's judgmental. Even if you care, maybe you've been acting out of a mindset that sees the world as either or, that you have to fight, that you have to spark some kind of controversy in order to be seen, that you have to demand, that you have to say things that will make another person angry just to get them to come back to you and notice you, or vice versa. A lot of us do it the other way. We say what will make people happy so we don't have to be seen. We go along with the world without causing much friction, or at least we don't acknowledge the friction that we feel. So, yeah, both of those are reality. And how do we hold them both? How do we be part of the constellation, the little speck on the earth, and an individual with agency that's aware and noticing? Because that little act of noticing is actually an act of agency, of power. The real sort of power to really notice and realize what we're part of is very powerful. So, constellation thinking sort of takes these insights and tries to look at them in more depth, how we're embedded in our relationship, how meaning might emerge through those relations, through the way that we've noticed what we're part of, so to speak. And care becomes the practice of just of this noticing, of the living, of the dying, of the changing of patterns, noticing it, and as part of it, not to control it necessarily, but to at least start to fill into its dance and its rhythms in a way that we can maintain it. We can care for it, even if we can't fully control it. We can care for ourselves. We can maintain ourselves in the best way possible. We can find a way to be in this difficult, challenging world, and this beautiful, amazing, mysterious world, while acknowledging both. Well, not even both. You see, that's also kind of this dichotomous way of thinking, but while acknowledging that there's a whole multiplicity of ways of being in that world and being as that world. And so let's think of the night sky again, and ways that people find their way through the world and literally move through the world. And constellations of stars, the stars have been one way that a lot of people do that. It's been a way we find our way, the way it's like a map. It's been a map for a lot of ancient civilizations. You can tell where you are by the stars, and you can tell the time of the year, which is also a way of telling where you are, by the stars. But we also have, had this creative aspect where we see Orion the hunter, or we see Inu in the dark spaces between the stars. So it's not even only about the stars. Some Aboriginal cultures have this beautiful way of looking at the dark spaces between the stars, and it's in that darkness that you find your way. So it's the same sky, different patterns, different meanings, and that space between is actually what's the consistent holding. I think that's actually very beautiful too, and says something really crucial about our participation in this. And when we see the constellations, we can also see even those can become ways of seeing what isn't the constellation, which is itself another sort of constellation. So we allow it to change, and we realize there's a space holding it. This reminds me of the garden notion again, of care as a way of practicing this holding of the paradox, not trying to solve one side by the other, because you have to be present and you have to remain open to what's becoming. And you can't judge yourself, identify yourself as any negative thought or any positive thought, really. You're just the presence of your noticing, and you attend to that. And you notice the relationships that are part of you and that you are part of. And you also understand that it's temporary, it's shifting, it's changing, even though the space holding it is always going to be the space that is holding it. So we're not isolated individuals, but we're nodes in a constellation of relationships. And care isn't some kind of optional thing. It's what holds all that. It is that space. It's that overall ontological relation, or at least that's how we look at it. But really, it's beyond all those words. When we choose to tend to it, or when we can't because we're just overwhelmed, all of that is the shape of our actual everyday sky, so to speak. And the crises that we face, the fragmentation that some people are feeling, the mental health issues, these are real. And all I'm saying is that maybe we can find another way of relaxing into that reality so as to be able to hold it for one another a little bit better, or to help each other hold it without judging it, without trying to solve it, at least for a minute. Because, of course, we do want to help each other. We do want to make this a better world for each other as we experience it. But part of that is realizing we're experiencing it, just recognizing, noticing that lived experience. And not just as individuals, but as all these different constellations of relationships, your family or your friends, or even just the books you read and the people the videos you're watching, or, the people you meet out on the street. Those are incredibly important encounters in terms of care. If you can relax into this constellatory understanding of yourself being one part of it, and you don't have to go along with old scripts telling you how to act, or you don't have to listen to the thoughts in your head that seem so much to be you, but they're not. They're scripts that you've learned and that you've been repeating, and you are the body, the lived experience, the noticing. So this means that recognizing you're not like one little star burning, you're not alone. Nothing is in isolation. We can't be in isolation. We are all constellations of relationships. That doesn't mean they're easy or that we even feel like we're part of them. Sometimes all these relationships are holding us and we don't even feel them because we've had a hard life, or because it's just hard to feel them. But they're there and they're important. And by those relationships, I really mean even the people you think of as strangers. Every interaction you're having is an important one when it comes to the possibilities of care and transformation. So when you feel stuck, or maybe when what's needed is to break out of your old patterns, the first thing to do maybe is to notice the constellation, to lay on the ground with your face pointed towards all that you are part of, but that you don't understand, feeling the ground behind you, but also letting yourself sort of float there on this amazing planet that's part of this larger constellation of planets in this sky. So the question isn't really about right or wrong in those moments. It's not about judging yourself or anyone else, or it's not, there's that way you can kind of let go of the anxiety and the tending to for just a moment and just be. And that may help you with the care, with the tending and the concern that is, what part of life. When you get up, we can't all just lay there looking at constellations all the time. But once we are aware there's a constellation, as we go about our day, maybe we can keep that in mind. Sort of like I have I'm an adult, I'm a woman now, but as a kid I had that feeling thanks to my teacher, and it stayed with me, and it's actually helped me get a little bit of perspective, to remember I'm not my thoughts, to remember I'm smaller than I might feel at times, and I'm part of something larger than I might feel at times. Something is holding me. I like to think of it as love and care. And I like to also understand that that's not a easy thing to be held by or to be part of, because, it's holding us, but it's infusing us as well. So the question isn't whether we are going to see these patterns in the constellations. We're always going to find patterns, and the patterns I see in the stars might be different from yours. And over time, many different people all around the world have seen different things in those constellations in the same way that we see different things in the constellations of relationships around us. But we've also had a lot of similarity and overlap and resonance together in the ways that we've beheld the stars and been the stars and the patterns that we've noticed, and in that relaxing into feeling ourselves as in relation to everything around us, not as separate from it. It's hard to do, and it's hard to really understand, but it's worth feeling it. You don't have to understand it. Just feel yourself as part of a larger constellation sometimes if you can. Even if it's just looking at the stars above you and not being your thoughts for a moment, you know. Not even being not being anything that you've defined yourself as with words or images. Just being present and noticing that sky. And then thinking about in your daily life, what are you taking care of? What are you concerned about? What are you caring for? And how is it caring for you? You know, the plants in the garden are also giving us food, the trees, the sunlight, all of this is giving to us too. And often in our relationships, that's true too. Again, even if it's just the person at the grocery store or someone walking down the street, they can give you a smile, or they can move out of the way, or they can help you with moving a box, or they can just generally try to be in a space that's not judging you. And those are huge gifts that open up further ways for us to be constellations together. So, you know, there's the darkness between the stars, which is beautiful and rich and just as important as the light of the stars. And I guess the question is just, how can you realize yourself as that constellation and begin to think about it a little bit in daily life, that you are a constellation of the things that you're relating with. And what would you like to be relating with? Maybe you want to go read a poem. Maybe you want to find a tree that's beautiful. Maybe you want to look at some leaves as it's becoming autumn now, and the colors and the shapes. I mean, all these things are relations, and they're all making you the constellation that you are as you move through your day. They are your thinking, the things you are surrounding yourself with, and the patterns that you are repeating in your own languages, mind, thoughts, but also that you're reading or that you're grasping with or at. All of that's becoming part of the constellation. So what kind of constellation would you like to have, and maybe start bringing some of those stars into your world. Maybe it's, instead of watching a certain kind of video that's not making you feel good, you think of something that would, even if it's a cartoon from your childhood, or maybe it's a poem or a song that your grandmother read to you, or maybe it's just going for a walk with your dog, or start to imagine these lived experiences as the regularities that you are interacting with as part of a constellation, if you can. And if that doesn't make any sense at all, that's okay too. Just look at the sky and feel the power of it. And I hope that you also feel cared for by something in the world that is larger than you. I know it's not always easy to feel it, but you are cared for because you're here and you're alive. Even if you're doing the caring for yourself, that's a big, beautiful action that you've been doing for however long you've been doing it. It's an act of care that you're caring for yourself, and a lot of potential is held in that, and a lot of possibility. If you've been able to do it this far, which you have, you can keep doing it, and you can find better ways to care for yourself. And a lot of the time, that comes through caring for others. Even if it's, don't be hard on yourself if you can't access that feeling all the time, but a couple minutes a day at first, care for something else, or find something that makes you feel like you're part of something bigger. I always come back to poetry, and I know some people think poetry is like silly, but poetry can also be a good song, an uplifting song, a song that gives you some feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. But I'd love to hear what ways you found to feel part of a constellation, to understand the smallness and the largeness of life and of your life, of our lives here nested together. All right, so that's my diary for today. And I hope that you're doing well out there. Thanks for everything you're trying to do. And thanks for putting up with this crazy world that we're in and trying to care. If you're just doing that, you're doing a lot. All right. Be well.